to the meeting of the Corporate Policy and Finance Committee on the 22nd of September 2021. Firstly, welcome all back to the Council Chamber. I think probably we've all actually had at least one meeting already here, but it's nice to be back in the Chamber. Apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair. Apologies have been received from Councillor Farmer, who's on holiday.
Thank you. We're all happy to accept her apologies.
She's making me very jealous. She sends me lovely pictures of the sea.
Lovely. Right. Any declarations of interest? Excellent. Chairman's report and urgent items. I've no direct points to make other than those to later on the agenda, except to make a comment on the food festival last Saturday, which I think was immensely successful. It was nice to see the town back and vibrant again, as it has been today for the Classics on the Common. I mention it here at this committee because obviously that's the sort of thing that's essential to the commercial income of the council, and I'd like to thank the officers and other organisers of that event. I've certainly personally seen some good feedback and had some excellent feedback about the event. So please convey our thanks on that, Carl. Thank you.
If I may add, there were some volunteers who did litter picking at the event, and they just did a fantastic job. And I've been joking that I think the streets were cleaner after the event than they were before. They did such a marvellous job in clearing everything.
Thank you. Please pass the compliments on to the Bethany Church. Yeah. Okay. Do we have any public questions in accordance with Standing Order 22?
I'm received, yeah.
Thank you. Item 5, minutes to confirm the minutes of the Corporate Policy and Finance Committee held on the 16th of June 2021, which obviously was held virtually. Are there any comments on those minutes? Thank you. Can we therefore confirm those minutes?
I can confirm the last 20 seconds. It was the one that I arrived and you just finished.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Yes. Right. Minutes of meetings referred to the Corporate Policy and Finance Committee, the Accounts and Risk Subcommittee. Councillor Turnbull.
Thank you, Chair. I have a pleasure in presenting the minutes of the meeting on the 27th of July for approval by this committee.
We're all happy with those? I think the recommendations are all concerned with the rest of the agenda. Right, item 7, officers' reports. The item 7.1 forward planner and resolution tracker. The committee is asked to note the forward planner and the resolution tracker. Do we have any comments from councillors on either of those two items? Excellent. Can we therefore agree to the recommendation to note those two items? Thank you. Okay. Item 7.2 financial regulations. Finance Manager.
Okay, so this report is a review of financial regulations. The main thing to highlight is section 11, which is in summary kind of reflects the process of our sum up machine that we've got so we can take card payments. So that's the bigger change. The others are minor changes. Where we've now got fuel cards that we use for equipment as well as vehicles, and some job officer title changes and references to the corporate management team. So the other smaller ones, but as I say, the main one is section 11. And perhaps take any questions.
Any questions? I have a couple of minor questions. The first one was regarding the item 12.2. Ordering will be carried out with the council's online finance software. and then we have crossed out retention of paper order system. What happens if we have to make an order and the software for some reason isn't available? Have a backward process.
In those circumstances, I'm not sure that, I suppose, yes, we would revert to a paper one in those circumstances, but I'm certainly very confident with the software that we've got and haven't had any issues. So I can't see that it would be I can't see that it would be a problem. But
I just wondered.
yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah. You addressed some of my other questions when I came to earlier on the agenda. Yes, item 6.6, payments to other government funds. What do you have? Do you have anything specific in mind?
This specific one in mind with that was to do with the land registry. So any payments that we make to the land registry, they're preferred if only option of payment is like direct debit. So that was why I thought it was best to be all government departments, just in case there's any others that come up in the future. But the main one is the land registry.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask if the committee is happy with the recommendation to council the amendments to financial regulations be adopted? Thank you.
May I, Chair, ask a question? These regulations, obviously, each council updates on a regular basis. Is there any attempt at some point to look at what you've got, what other councils have, just to see if they're roughly all following the same lines, or there's any exceptions that we've forgotten about, etc.?
Occasionally there's bits of best practice that comes out that everyone tries to adopt, but in general, I think everyone started from a similar place and then everyone gets tweaked slightly as you move on through the years. But certainly, if there's any best practice things that come out, then we'll always take those on board.
Yeah, item 7.3, earmark reserve policy review. Can I have nothing?
So there's no changes been made to the actual policy, but I just thought it'd be good practice just to give councils the opportunity to make any comments if there's anything that they feel would like to be changed. The second recommendation in the report is the release of the 4 different reserves that are noted in 2.1.2 for the football club site, the play areas, ill health, liability pension, and the audio-visual equipment that's being asked to be transferred, the funding of that from earmarked reserves to capital reserves, just as a better use of council's money. I have to take any questions if anyone's got any more detail on the project.
I've got a question about the policy. Can I just raise that? I appreciate the policy's been in place for a while, but my attention was drawn to 3.2, where we say basis on which earmark reserves can exist, and all of them make clear to me except 2, in the sense of I appreciate surpluses can occur, you earmark some money and then in the end you've not needed to spend it all, but I would have thought at that point it needs to go into general reserve or something. It can't remain earmarked if the expenditure is finished and just be a surplus.
I think it would be with creating a new one if we had any, so say we had a project and there was a surplus at the end of it, giving you the option rather than putting that money back into general reserves to say we're going to earmark the rest of that for this other smaller project.
So you transfer it to another earmarked fund?
Yeah,
okay.
Or potentially create a new one with that surplus depending on the circumstances.
Would that, if that did occur in reality, if that did occur, would that come back to this committee to say we've got a surplus of 30,000 and we think for good reason it's heading somewhere else, and then it's no longer my point is it's no longer earmarked for the thing that originally gave a surplus, it gets earmarked something else. Yeah, I'm fine with that. Thank you. Explanation.
I went to the football club side, underwriting tribunal, but that was actually the contracted amount, wasn't it? That will be 125.
Yeah, that's correct, Chair. So on this particular one, this is a case where within our reserves policy, there's a two-stage approach. One is allocating something to the reserves, and the second is then releasing that. So the 125 was allocated as part of the transfer, which was the liability that the council, the town council, took on from the district council at the time of transfer, which is fully covered, you recall, from a third party, the football club, as part of that arrangement. So we may have to incur the full costs of the 125 and claim that back. However, given the timing and the on the 3G pitch project, then we are unlikely to do that. Because essentially, once the 3G pitch is built, any outstanding liability of 125 is built.
Could I also just ask about the ill health liability insurance, which appeared this year, which was obviously a change to the pensions or policy this year. Is there any similar potential changes to pensions or similar contracts that might arise in the near future?
There's nothing that's been highlighted to me on that. We've had the, trying to think which year the triennial valuation was, so that's not due for another couple of years now, I think. So it's that would, I would have thought that would be when any changes would come out at the next triennial valuation.
Thank you very much. In that case, can I ask if the committee would adopt 2.1.1 approve the EMR reserves policy and 2.1.2 approve the release of the stated reserves? Thank you. Item 7.4, budgetary control 2021-22 finance budget.
So this report reflects the financial position as at the end of July this year. I can draw your attention to Appendix A on page 56. So we are currently showing a favourable variance of just over 18,000, with the main reason for this being the vacant posts that we had in, within the Green Spaces team. Just to say as well that this won't continue, it's not a long-term saving because one of the posts has already been filled and the other post is going to be filled next week, I believe. The other variance, just to point out, is the adverse variance on the capital project, which relates to the Rockhampton play area. And just to reiterate 3.12 in the report, that discussions are ongoing with third parties about how this will be funded. And the intention is that I'll be able to provide more definitive answer on this when this committee next meets. That's all I was going to add, unless I'm happy to take any other questions.
Thank you. You've taken one of my questions. Is there any other questions? I just want to say that at this stage, for the first 3 months of the year, that is very encouraging. See, we're not varying from the plan, except for the one specific item we know about in terms of staffing. I think that's very encouraging at this point of the year. Obviously, it's still early on, it's 3 months. In particular, I know the commercial income shows a deficit of 3,000, but you know, at this point of the year, I think in the scheme of things, that's not particularly worry about at this stage. I think it's very good that we've got to that point. For somebody who is not as educated as others around the room, could you explain what a viaduct is?
It's a net nil movement between two budgets.
Thank you. Sorry, I've never heard that term. Right. I should have Googled it. I thought I'd just show my ignorance on the point.
I think Muslim councillors mustn't attend to it.
Well, I'll be honest then. Thank you.
Very
Thank you. All right. Okay.
Can I just ask a question? I'm just wondering what people think. Obviously, a lot of things are going up in price at the moment, aren't they? You know, there's delayed supplies, generally things going up in price, including our costs as a town council. Is there any potential to increase our higher rates, or I don't know, increase the rates we charge other people to try and offset some of that?
Yeah.
Just a general, yeah.
Yeah, that can certainly be looked at as part of the budget setting process. So the things that are controllable to us are things like the farmers market and or higher costs. That can certainly be looked at. It's just finding that balance between increasing the price and making sure we don't lose our existing customer base.
Just a slightly rhetorical question.
Yeah.
Councillor Turnbull, I think.
Thanks, Chair. My question was along similar lines. Good situation at the moment, Dan, but going forward, bearing in mind there's now so many uncertainties apparently on the horizon, the way of increases in gas, electricity, you name it, there'll be a lot more coming through, I'm sure. Do you have any gut reactions to what the year-end position might be? I know it's early days yet, but do you feel things are going to sort of run away from you a little bit or not?
It's so difficult to say at this stage. There's so many unknown variables that can happen. I think can only really say that the position that we're in now is a favourable position.
I've said something to that, Chair. So as Dan says, it is a bit uncertain. What we do have on some of our budget lines, our profile spend are in the last quarter of the year. So some of our improvements in our management plans, so for Common, Rock Park or Batford, are scheduled for the last quarter. So part of the reason why we do that is to make sure that we don't spend all of our flexible money up front. So if we do identify some issues, at the halfway through the year, at least we've got some flexibility to come to committee to see if there is something that committee wishes us to change in order to balance off.
I mean, for example, what's your heat, light and power annual spend here for the council, roughly?
60, including business rates, utilities.
Yeah, that's including business rates. So I think if that
Councillor Freeman, it'd be within the line of, it shows a £60,000 budget a year, 5988. But some of that will be rates.
Yeah, well, it's just my guess, the next 6 months, the power costs, etc., are going to go up maybe 50%. I don't know what your contract is. You could well see increases of 50%.
It's certainly something that we will keep a close eye on, and we have to report back on that. I know I started a new agreement only a couple of months ago, so I'm hoping we'll be protected slightly from it, but it's certainly something I'm aware of and keep a close eye on.
Maybe you could just come back to sell that business rates and utilities line, how much relates to light and power.
Yeah, no problem.
And we'd have a better idea of the scale, at least. I agree that it'd be very difficult to be specific, but we'd have a better idea. Councillor Maynard.
I just wanted to say, I noticed on the end that you were charging £10 for premier parking on the common. I'd like to commend that. Whoever thought, I don't know whether you make the money from or whether they are, but I commend that whoever it was is initiative, and I suggest that you might want to consider that for events, that we actually charge for some parking, through the summer, and it doesn't damage the land obviously, but you start charging for premier parking. I mean, you could make quite a lot of money in a day with 40 or 50, 60 cars parked on it.
I think with the current example, that funding goes to the Classics on the Common kind of charity.
Well, that's fine, but it's a good idea for the future.
Yeah.
So just on that, Chair, the reason that was put in place is previous to the premium parking, people parked on there anyway. So to utilise the space and to bring more money for charities,
It's a very
good idea. I can't remember whose idea it is, but they asked permission for the town council if they could charge to use our land because it's for charity. Then
If it's going to the charity, I think that's fine.
I think it's a great idea.
Councillor Paul.
I think we've got to answer the heating, electricity, gas, or whatever. It's not a domestic type thing, is it? Standard tariff.
No, we've got a separate contract with a broker, if you like.
It'll still be effective, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure that.
Councillor Paul.
I was just commenting on the overall position in that we're talking obviously about heat, light, but quite a lot of the budget the expenditure is presumably fixed for the year. I'm thinking about, do grounds maintenance contract staff costs that the next pay review is presumably April next year. The grounds maintenance contract, there's not an escalator within the year. Whatever we're paying, we're paying. So quite a lot. I agree when we're acquiring fuel for the chipper and obviously for this and some costs obviously of children. It should be quite limited within the year. The bigger exposure will be, which is highlighted while next year onwards, isn't it, in terms of where we will be exposed to all these contracts potentially being revised upwards. I don't want to confirm that, but that's good to hear.
And then just on that point, Chair, I think the other thing we're finding is it's costing a lot more to do things. So, you know, to build a boardwalk or to deliver our fencing requirements around lots, you know, the costs of that have gone up dramatically. So we're seeing pressures, we're going to see the pressures on utilities and business rates and others, but we're also seeing it on our management plans as well, where actually we're getting less for our money because of the costs that have gone up dramatically.
Gentlemen.
Is this materials or labour? Or both?
To be honest, Chair, it's a mix of both.
Because I reckon a lot of them are going to come back down again.
Yeah.
You know, if you wait a year.
I'm not so sure about that. I think a lot are going to stick, to be honest.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think there's
we're
specific problems on bricks and things.
Yeah,
I think we're in danger of the usual thing of three economists in the room, we're getting 4 different answers.
Yeah, that's true.
To be honest. And I'm an economist, so I can say that.
Yeah, I'm not.
Okay. Any other comments on the budget control out of July? Okay. I can't remember if I did this or not, but the committee has to note the report, note the reason of reserves, and note and approve the firemen's. Now we know that they are shown in Appendix A. Councillor Turnbull, are you?
Oh, sorry.
I didn't want to know your right to be sent.
Page 56.
Right, agenda item. That leads us nicely onto agenda item 7.5, the budget 2022-23 first look. The committee is asked to know the budget timetable and agree the inflation assumptions, approve the standing committee's reviews and the level of general reserves. I have taken the opportunity of having a bit of a pre-discussion about this document with the officers, because I think it very much is a first look. There are a lot of uncertainties at this stage. We are very early still into the financial year. It's very useful to look at it, but I think I will have a proposal about the proposed rise at first look at 9.2% and see how we can address that. But before I put that proposal, are there any comments from members of council?
I'm not wishing to prejudge what you're finally going to say, but I just say, although it's an early look, we have to remember that we got ourselves into a tangle last year when we very, very, very late on. I think we had to call an emergency meeting with 2 or 3 days because we decided that the increase that had been projected for some time was unacceptable, and then we went around to deal with that. And I just think we ought to be, whatever we're finally going to agree, we ought to be at least indicating out of this committee whether we think a rise at that level or a different level is going to be acceptable to put forward for council. And if it's not, how are we going to pay for it? Because there's not going to be any magic monetary. And if we're going to pay for it, for example, by cuts, we know that takes some time to deliver. And therefore, just don't see competition against us. That's why
I entirely agree. I actually wrote to the officers earlier in August to chair the committee, saying that I wish to avoid the discussions that we had last year, because decisions taken in haste are not necessarily the best decisions. I think we all agree with that, and we wanted to avoid that. That's one of the reasons we brought this first look forward. And I think it is very useful to have a look as a first look. We didn't give the officers any particular guidance at that stage, because we need to see. So it's a bit chicken and the egg. My proposal is that we ask the officers to tell us what the implications would be of a 7% rise, so we can get an idea on this budget from the 9.2% about what the implications might be of a lower rise. I don't prejudge that because, as Councillor Scott has said, that there may well be items to make decisions upon. We do need to take it on a timely basis. So my proposal would be that we ask the officers to provide us with a sensitivity at 7% to consider in time for the November corporate finance meeting. I think this is a very useful document as a start at 10, but I think we need to give this some more consideration, given where we are with people's own incomes out there, the certain uncertainties in the economy, and so on, just so we can see what the impact would be of a lower preset rise. I entirely agree that we need to try to avoid that, so we try to come to some conclusions in November and not January. Councillor Turner.
Chair, I presume, looking at item 5.7, this obviously shows, I think, 90% or thereabouts, and you're suggesting 7. One assumes once the officers are fully aware of the increase in the equivalent preset because of extra houses or new houses in the borough, that will certainly begin to narrow that gap quite considerably.
My understanding is, I'll let the officers go on my understanding that the case, yes, so I think this is based upon the assumed base from last year and collection assumptions from last year. So yes, hopefully that would actually contribute something of that we've already indicated, maybe of a pressures upwards.
Yeah, accept that.
Councillor Maynard.
There's been a look at the boundaries for the district council and some of the houses that were originally in the house that were Redburn have come into Harpenden. I don't know when the boundaries for towns will be looked at to support that, but that might be interesting because I think we'd find that we'd gain houses rather than lose them, we'd gain properties. So do you know when the boundary review for towns would be?
Yes, Chair. So we've got an item on council next week that is the community governance review. So the districts are looking to start that before Christmas. It will run for a period of 12 months, including a number of consultations, and any changes will be in place for the start of the 23 financial year. So it won't impact next year, but it will impact
the year after. Because I think it's going to give us a significant increase.
So the important thing to note, Chair, is that any changes would need to be off the back of, if the town council wished to make any changes, we would have to put representations forward. At council next week, we are sharing with you a presentation that you may have already seen from district, but also starting to pose some of the key things that as officers we think the town council may want to consider. And that's broadly 2 areas that you mentioned. I think you mentioned certainly one of them.
I mean, I'm thinking of 2 areas in particular where the residents have long said they don't belong to the areas they're in. They consider they belong to Harpenden, and they actually use all the resources within Harpenden. I mean, they're literally separated from they're on the outskirts of Harpenden, and they look into Harpenden for all their needs and social and retail, etc. So it's never made much sense that they weren't part of Harpenden.
So Chair, on that, to bring it back to numbers, so that particular area which is coming from Wheathampstead into the Harpenden district boundaries, but those properties will still pay to the parish council in Wheathampstead. It's a bit of an anomaly. There's 89 properties there. The other area that's up for consideration has got more properties linked to the Harpenden rural area. So, but that's on the discussion for council. And perhaps Chair can make a couple of answers to another question around the tax base. So just to clarify, 2 things on the tax base and then 1 further comment about variables. So first of all, the first look here does reflect a slightly higher tax base collection rate So the collection rate that was applied to this year's budget was 97.5. Now we've started to have some conversations with district officers, and whilst it's not official yet, the response we've had is that they expect the collection rate to be at least 98. So this first look is based on 98. Now, of course, if it comes back looking like 98.5, then great for us, because that our starting point is even better. Dan and I have been reviewing what the actual collection rates have been for the last 2 years, and we are hoping that the actual collecting rates are matched more closely to the collection rate used next year, because actually that is higher. That's up around 98.7 or something. So that's the first part, collection rate. The second part is linked into that tax base, and I guess one of the benefits, Chair, to the suggestion of essentially us doing some more work and having another look in November is the closer that we get to December, the more of the variables become known to us. The tax base, but also things like utilities that Councillor Turnbull spoke about. So the not wanting personally to leave it too late, the closer we do get to December and the November consideration list means that we should be able to give you much more accurate predictions on some of these, which may in itself bring that percentage down.
Thank you for that. Any other comments before I put my proposal? Okay, well, I was going to propose, therefore, that instead of the recommendation at paragraph 2, that we ask the officers to review these numbers with a look to a 7% increase in the preset and the implications of what that might be in time for the November meeting of this committee, which seems to me to be a compromise, allowing us to get to know a few more of the unknowns, not leaving it too late to run us into January. Would the committee support that proposal? Thank you. Now, I understand that this item is actually on the council agenda for next week because of the timing of the meetings. The papers have been issued. It's appropriate for this committee to make a recommendation that the council defer that discussion at that meeting.
So, Chair, yeah, I think in light of that decision you've taken there to have essentially have a second look in November, you will be in the position at the moment that council will essentially be looking at this report you've got in front of you in next week. However, this committee, who is kind of the guiding committee for this, would have already agreed that you're going to look at it further in November. So we're in a tricky kind of governance situation there, because we have issued the agenda for council as we have to, and because the timetable is due to go to council, it does appear on there. So in light of your agreed resolution there, I think it is best to, or I would ask you to consider a recommendation along the line that CPF now recommend to council that you defer that first look from September to November in order for CPF to have a second look based on that resolution you've had a look at. If you were to make that resolution, what would need to happen, and it was agreed at council next week at the start under the urgent item, the town mayor would give an update on that and would advise of the resolution and the recommendation made by CPF. At that point, council will be asked to vote as to whether they wish to defer the item later on. If that was accepted, it would come off the agenda. If that wasn't approved, then you would have the discussion and first look at council next week. I know that's complicated, but that's just from our governance in terms of doing it properly, how we've had to set out the council agenda, because we said we would in this report.
That's valuable to do from the proper council.
I just thought on that, I think it's entirely correct. Just to clarify, would we state for council that the sort of target or the number that we've been thinking of was the 7%? That would be sort of stated, though it's understood that's going to be looked at in November. But just because only half of us are here and the other half might not know that, it's not confidential because we've said it here, so we'll probably just mention it.
Certainly, Chair. So what will happen is the town mayor would need to do it under the urgent item. So in that he would share the resolutions that are made. we will also, as officers, send that round to all councillors in advance anyway. But the formalities, the town mayor will do that. We will vote to accept that, and essentially, when you come to that item on the agenda, you've already decided to defer that. I know it's a bit fiddly, but it just means, from a governance and audit point of view, we think things entirely appropriate.
That's fine. Yeah, are we happy to adopt that recommendation to council? Thank you. Okay, item 7.6, citizens' advice for today. This is a report for noting. I will make one comment. At the last meeting, Councillor Briggan asked whether I thought it was appropriate to look further at the amount that we paid for this body. I have made some inquiries on this, and the view I have come to is that the SLA has just been agreed, I forgot that actually, in January 21, and therefore it will be appropriate, if we're going to do a review of this, to do that review at the next date of the next SLA review, which isn't for 3 years, I think. 3 years, but that will be the appropriate point at which to do that. That's so Councillor Briggan is aware that I didn't ignore her comment. Councillor Maynard.
I think Councillor Briggan was quite right in asking for a review, because I think that we always have to bear in mind that actually people in Harpenden are paying twice for citizen advice. They're paying for it through their district council precept, and again through the town council precept. So it's always worth bearing that in mind, because the district council gives them a large sum which we're paying for as well.
I think, yeah.
So it's always worth just bearing that in mind. Saying that, they're a very reputable and useful charity that adds a lot to the town. So
I think let's take that debate at the appropriate time. Are there any comments that go actually on the actual report this month?
And one, well, more a question really. The letter mentions that they've got 52 volunteers and 21 staff, which is not far, what's that, 73, and helps 76 clients. So they've almost got a 1-to-1 ratio of people to help us to people that need help. But would these people also help other, other people as well in different districts or something?
My interpretation of that, and I'm happy to tell me I'm wrong here, is they've got 52 volunteers and 21 staff across the whole district to support 76 clients in Harpenden. I think that's my interpretation of the report. Though I must be, I find it quite difficult to interpret, but that's what I think that means. I don't think it's a 1-for-1 template.
Yeah, Chair, so that's correct, your understanding of that. What I would add is 2 points in relation to that. So relating to how they're operating at the moment as a result of COVID. So normally the Harpenden setup would not have 52 volunteers and 21 staff working on it, I believe. But because they are working through web chat and through phone, that is the kind of email, that's their kind of collective team that is dealing with their support offer in the district at the moment, I understand. And of that, as it says there's been 76 clients from Harpenden. One of the things, just to make the committee aware, Chair, is that one of the questions that I have that I'll be feeding back is an understanding of when they plan, or if they plan, to switch their model back to their previous model. Because I noted in this that up to June they were still operating under a phone or web chat system. Do they have plans to move back to face-to-face? So 2 reasons why I asked that. 1, because I think it will be of interest to the committee, but 2, because linking to the conversation about future reviews, a lot of the costs that were argued as to the reasons why they needed funding were around kind of fixed costs that if you're operating a remote service, you don't necessarily have as much. So I'm sure that council want to be aware of that if at any point we review that.
Thank you.
Just in response to that, I mean, I do know that they are. You would need to check the details, because I've funded them from my county council budget to move back to a more direct face-to-face. And the reasoning is that often the case that people who need citizen advice, the people who are really hard to reach and use the internet. So it was an additional problem in COVID times. I know a lot of other groups suffer the same. I don't know all the details, but you should ask exactly what they're going to do and when, but that is their fundamental plan to maybe some of the things I funded to help set that up.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask the committee notes the report? Yep. Item 7.7, business continuity plan. That's right.
So, thank you, Chair. This is the business continuity plan that was mentioned earlier, that was reviewed by the Accounts and Risk Subcommittee before being presented to this committee. So, in summary, this document is used when an incident occurs and we're trying to get back up and running as quickly as possible. Happy to take any questions.
I would say that we spent a considerable amount of time in the risk subcommittee going through this. It is, from my past commercial experience, a very, very comprehensive business impact analysis, very detailed, very comprehensive, and I'd just like to know that I think the officers have done a fine job in putting this together. Any comments?
Is Roger on that committee?
Well, we're reviewing this. He was previous year, but not.
I was about to say, if Roger's happy, I'm happy.
I think it would have been longer.
Yeah.
Roger did see it at when he was chair of that committee the previous year.
That's good enough for me.
He has a real.
All I will say is, I'm grateful for the students' business and industry. This is a different league.
Yes.
You should copyright it.
I think
He means it's excellent.
I think we all agree from our various public experiences it was a very good business continuity. Okay. So can we therefore with the recommendation approve the business continuity plan? Thank you. So, item 7.8, merit awards. Committee's asked, we've seen this is an annual paper. This committee setting up a working party, the same format of working party as in previous years, nominations and determining the awards. Am I right in saying that the format is exactly as in previous years? Thank you. Any comments or questions? Okay, can we agree to the recommendation that we approve the process? Thank you. Right. Review. Item 7.9, information point opening hours. Carl, Dan?
Yeah, Chair. So just in summary, the way in which councils and the way in which people access support services for councils has changed dramatically over the years. The town council's information point perhaps hasn't, in my view, changed as swiftly as it should do to reflect that and offer support in a wider way than face to face. However, during COVID, we were forced to shut the information point on its opening hours and were forced to put in place, or took the opportunity to put in place, a more fluid way for people to speak to all officers about all sorts of different matters, allowing members of the public to essentially have a guaranteed slot with an officer on a subject, rather than dropping into the town hall, maybe finding the officer there, maybe not. So we run an awful lot of appointments since the pandemic began. And essentially this paper is looking to formalise that approach. So by removing the opening hours, which from an officer capacity point of view are quite difficult, because essentially we have one of our officers whose job is to do something else. sitting waiting for someone to come in. And whilst they can get on a lot of work, potentially they could be in the middle of something quite big, unpredicted, someone could come in and it takes you off that. So we're looking to really change the way in which we run our information and have access to officers to essentially open and expose officers to members of the public even more bookable appointments.
Okay, Councillor Maynard.
Just one concern. Just one concern about it. I'm just a bit worried about elderly people who don't necessarily have access to any IT, and that they've not got smartphones, they don't have PCs. They're kind of been left behind in this. With this now, a lot of them would rely on popping into the town hall to get things done. I'm just a bit concerned about what happens with these people. Now, in time, it will sort itself out. It's everybody. Each cohorts move on and everybody has access to it. But I was talking to a 95-year-old today who had real problems getting out somebody to do something over the weekend. It was necessary for somebody from the council to come out and help him, and nothing happened. He spent a lot of time on the phone trying to get through very complicated call management systems. Is there anything we can do to help people like that? Maybe even just open for 1 hour, one day a week, or 2 hour period once a week.
We do 10 a.m. till noon on a Monday or something. I don't know whatever day.
Yeah, so Chair, I think the problem is we could choose a small slot, but that won't work for everybody. I think the reality behind this and what still happens more so now when we're back in town hall is we often get people come to the door and knocking, ring the buzzer, and what we're saying is just because we're not open, we're not going to go and see those people. We still do do that.
So you will talk to
Yeah, we still talk to them. So quite often we get someone.
Unofficially,
yeah, but what we haven't got is a set opening times where we got someone sitting waiting for someone to come in who doesn't come in. So we're still very flexible and are still there to engage the public. This is about actually more formally moving to a new approach and promoting access to the council.
I've ended up going online and applying for parking tickets for people, disability parking tickets, for example. So it's that sort of thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's worth adding, Chair, that the role of the information point has changed in the last 5 years, and the council has taken deliberate changes to that. In particular, I think back to sort of 2016, 2017, when I arrived here, Town Council was doing an awful lot of services on behalf of other councils and other bodies. And quite often the other councils and other bodies were stopping doing their face-to-face services or no longer funding the Town Council to provide it. So the council took a decision back then to change, not to move away from face-to-face, but to ensure that we were consistent with other councils with the move to kind of more digital approach. So we have changed an awful lot over the time. At the start of COVID last year, it's fair to say before then we had a number of regulars, and many of the people that you described, Councillor Maynard, were the sorts of people that would come in just to have a chat with somebody, and actually they probably really didn't need anything. And that social side of things was really important. So we spent a lot of time early in the pandemic supporting those people and showing them ways in which they can get the support they need whilst everything was shut down. And that included referring them to other services like the Friendly Hoffman Trust and other places. So we'll still answer the door to people, but what we wouldn't have on this proposal is someone sitting at a desk waiting for someone to come in that may come in, might not come in. That's quite disruptive in terms of our lean infrastructure.
I think it's still there's an understanding that you don't turn people away. I think that's fine.
Could I ask, I've never judged ring the general line of the town hall, and I think need to do so. If they do they get to a human being or a choice 1, choice 2, choice 3?
So they get to, so the public line gets to a human being.
It does eventually. Good.
And then there are feeds off. But as part of this, if the committee were to approve it, we will kind of restructure our contact to make sure that you do get through to someone to start with.
I think as I move for the point that Councillor Mellors was about for elderly people, I think they generally do not like the option 1, 2, 3, and then they get cut off. And I've seen this many times, and
they just give up.
And then they just give up. So provided that somebody actually speak to somebody, I think that's the important.
So I just think on that, Chair, just to add one thing in that case, that and I don't take many of the general calls myself, but when I listen to colleagues, the amount of times they say, I've rung the town council because I can't get through to somewhere else because I go into that funnel. So I think that is really important for us to maintain that kind of direct contact.
It is. I personally experienced because my father, who is now 94, tried to get his COVID pass. Of course, he doesn't have a smartphone. So you have to ring the 119 number, and he made several attempts. In the end, I rang it for him. But it is important that they can get through to a human being. That's the important thing. Okay, Councillor Paul.
Yeah, very quickly. Will we start this straight away? First question. And also, if there's a pre-arranged, some people expect to come and sit down. You can't enter in these rooms or security locks on, so I assume we can operate it inside the space, inside the door, at the desk with a couple of chairs.
Yes, so Chair, it will vary, to be honest, depending on what the nature of the appointment is. So most of the appointments I do are in relation to signings, like proof of identity or pension signings. So I do a lot of those throughout the year. So they're bookable. I tend to do them outside during COVID. But actually, say if Heather or Mim were booked an appointment for someone that wanted to be taken for a planning application, then we would book an appropriate space in the town hall for them to come and have that meeting. Potentially, sometimes it might just be a phone call, an appointment over the phone. Potentially, if someone could use video technology, we'll do that. So the point is, it will be much more flexible in the range of ways in which we engage people, and people will guarantee to get to talk to a member of staff. We put in here that will be a key part of this is the cultural bit with the team. So there will be an expectation that I will put on the team to make sure that people are responded to very quickly, and that these appointments are made, and we are engaging with people in the format that is best appropriate.
I appreciate you've got to get solid notice, and it's on the website what times. When will this actually start? Personal appointment visits.
Yeah, so essentially, Chair, so we are closed now. So if the committee were to agree we wouldn't reopen. We would, in the next few days, sort out our phone lines to make sure that the speaking to a person point is in place, and we will kind of activate our comms plan, which will see a whole host of information sent out to various places, promoting the fact that you can engage the town council in these ways on these different subjects, which I think in itself people probably won't be aware of at this moment. So it's increasing our engagement with both people.
Can I ask, if we approve this, are we going to find a way of informing other councillors who aren't on this committee? I think probably want to be aware of this change.
Council,
yeah, you mentioned that. I think it's important. I think it's important that the whole council is aware. Okay, are there any other comments or?
Just want to say that I think everybody's changed a lot of the way they do it, and I think there is a real opportunity here to look at how things have been done traditionally and look at the learning over the last year or so and change, because it was never set in stone.
That's really interesting. Is the staff working partly from home still? While all coming back into the office?
So essentially the office is reopened, but under our new remote working policy that was approved earlier in the year. So essentially so for a desk-based full-time worker, they can work remotely up to 2 days a week. So the reality is there's a really strong presence in the office now, because many people are working remotely. So, but there is that flexibility still that council approved earlier in the year.
It can't become very boring when you talk to them.
I got sent into the office. I don't know what my wife is saying.
Right, can I put the recommendation then to the committee that we agree to these improvements? I think they are improvements to the information point service. Thank you. Okay, that concludes the agenda. The next meeting is on the 10th of November. Thank you. The meeting is then closed. It's 8:27, I think. Slightly wrong.